You definitely want your gold and silver because those are the things that money will pour into when everybody else realizes that there's nothing left to prop up the dollar. Gold and silver have gone down along with stocks. And then the Fed, gives up at some point, starts flooding the system with cash again. Some of that cash goes into financial assets and precious metals, and everything goes back up. If you time it right in gold and silver, you can make a lot of money because their moves tend to be very exaggerated because they're such small, illiquid markets compared to tech stocks or utilities or energy companies or whatever. So we have another chance again, for anybody who missed getting in at the very bottom of the last few cycles in precious metals, you might have another chance again this time around. But I think the really important thing about this iteration of the game is that it might be the last one, because this might be the time, with inflation rising, normally you would expect the Fed to be adamant about raising interest rates and tamping down inflation. So if they cave with inflation still 4, 5, 6% on the official gauges and 10 or 11% on the unofficial but more accurate gauges, that means they're giving up. There's no chance of controlling the decline in the value of the major currencies out there, because to do so would break the financial markets. And when everybody figures that out, that there's no adult supervision anymore in the financial markets, then all hell will break loose. And that's when you want to be loaded up in real assets. You want your farmland by that time. You want your rental house. You want your energy stocks. You definitely want your gold and silver, because those are the things that money will pour into when everybody else realizes that there's nothing left to prop up the dollar and the euro and the yen, and that the Fed is going to have to ease into inflation. And that's just all there is to it for as far as the eye can see. And we might have to just do that. We might just have to go back to something like that. So yeah, we'd still be using something called the dollar, but its reality would be that it's a name for a fractional amount of gold. And what happens in a currency reset is that you, and this is the best case scenario, where the governments of the world act rationally instead of just have the market force this on them, when they just declare that this is the change that's going to happen. We're going back to a commodity-based currency. It's going to be on these terms. Your previous dollars are going to be devalued by X amount, so that gives us a big burst of inflation. In other words, prices of many, many things go up in terms of dollars, which means the people who trust the government and hold a bunch of dollars going into that are the ones who get hurt. And the ones who see what's coming get out of their dollar-based investments in time and into real assets, they make out, And so it's kind of a trap that government incompetence and avarice is setting for regular people who aren't paying attention to this. Now they're starting to get it. The silver coins might be something that holds their value, while maybe the dollar doesn't, because all of a sudden the dollar's not. They're seeing inflation, they're seeing geopolitical turmoil, and they want some stability. So they're starting to clue into this now. And I suspect younger people with the same political views either are jumping into cryptos or have been into cryptos for quite a while because it's cool technology. But now they're starting to see why it's so useful, because it's a form of money that governments can't mess with, or it can't mess with as easily as they can with the dollar and the euro and the yen. So very interesting time. And the optimistic part of the scenario is that a lot of people are educating themselves and coming to the right conclusions. So we might have a critical mass of people on the correct side of this argument at some point. That's not a healthy system. So we're very unhealthy. We're financially a mess. Inflation is starting to rise, and you can't. We aren't going to go back to a normal world of 2% official inflation just because the pandemic is over. On the contrary, as people come back into the economy, demand higher wages, and then spend those wages, we're likely to see an acceleration in at least wage inflation, which is going to make things even worse. And what the short-term scary part of the story is that we hit a point where people start to panic buy stuff. In other words, they see the necessities of life going up dramatically, and they decide, well, instead of buying just this month's stuff at Costco, let me buy the next year's worth. I'll just load up the SUV with everything we're going to need for the next year. Well, that pushes prices up even further, which causes more people to panic. And you get this kind of runaway train of inflation going, where it's a feedback loop that the government cannot stop without raising interest rates to the point that they bankrupt basically the leveraged speculating community, which is to say everybody who requires low interest rates to function financially. And that's almost everybody now, so they're going to be in a box. And that kind of runaway inflation thing is what might make it clear to everybody that there is no fix. Because if the Fed looks at 7% inflation with a bullet, that's heading towards 10%, and they don't act aggressively, which is to say they don't raise interest rates up to above the inflation rate. That's what you need to do. You need real interest rates that are positive, not just slightly less negative. So, 7% inflation, you need 9 or 10% interest rates. Well, that destroys the financial system. So when people realize that those are our choices, then they're going to start acting accordingly, which is to say they're going to start panicking in a lot of different directions. The gold and silver recovery has been nice, but it's nothing compared to what's happening. The problem with precious metals is that you've got that potential big drop out there when stocks tank, and so you can see silver go back down to $12 easy. You can see gold to go back down to 1,400 or whatever very easily. These things could happen in a flash crash in the stock market, which, the last few weeks in the stock market have felt like the prelude to some kind of big panic dump. So we could easily see that happen. So if you went out, you heard me saying there's urgency, and you went out and bought all your gold and silver right now, you'd probably regret it. So don't do that, because I don't want, a world full of enemies out there that I cost a ton of money for. But do understand that that's the dynamic. We've got this big risk out there with gold and silver, so keep some powder dry so you can pick some up at the bottom. And this time around, if they do tank, don't hold back. This is the time to back up the truck, because the Fed cannot let interest rates go up much more than they are. They cannot let the stock market tank, and they're going to have to take steps to prevent that. And gold and silver will probably respond to it. So, be buying now, be stacking now regularly, but be prepared to buy more if they put it on sale for you. If you see $12 silver, I'm not going to say mortgage your house, but I would be considering mortgaging my house for something like that. It's one of those things where we've missed a couple of those. A lot of us have missed a couple of those episodes, and this is the big one. So, don't do never invest any money in anything you can't afford to lose. But with your excess capital, with what you have that's beyond your emergency fund and and the money that you'll need for the next 6 months to live, gold and silver, if they get whacked, will be a pretty good investment at that point.